Hello, everyone, and welcome to PCR's November Tips and Virtual Transition Times meeting. My name is Melissa Wyman, and I am PCR's Respite Care and Community Engagement Director. I will be your moderator this evening, so please feel free to send any questions or comments in the chat box below. We are so excited to be collaborating with Montgomery County Public Schools MCPS Transition Service Unit to provide an enhanced transition times program for transitioning youth, their families, and caregivers. We are delighted to offer this presentation with American Sign Language simultaneous interpretation. We will also be offering this presentation with Spanish simultaneous interpretation. The English and Spanish language versions will be archived on the PCR website Transition Times page. Just some Zoom tip reminders. We are using the webinar platform. We will wait for questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to submit any of your questions in the chat box below. Also, for captions, click Show Captions to see the captions for the webinar. You must select the speaking language you would like to show. And if you need to get into the Spanish channel, at the bottom of your screen, please select the interpretation icon and select the language and mute your original audio. One second. All right, so we are so fortunate tonight to have an amazing parent panel on DDA self-directed services. Each of these families have gone through different journeys to navigate the DDA system, and they are here to share their insight. Please note that this is a parent panel. They will be more than happy to answer any questions from their perspective. But if you have any specific DDA related questions, please reach out to your DDA regional office. So just so you know how everything's going to work out tonight, each panelist will have a maximum of 10 minutes to speak. And then following all the panelists, will have a time for questions. Okay, so let's get started. Debbie, if I can, I'm with Debbie. Thank you, Debbie. Here we go. Perfect.
Do you want me to just start?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm Debbie Fickenshire, and my daughter went to Montgomery County Public Schools and aged out in 2005. We picked up two traditional agencies, one for a job and one for support, which at the time we called residential, but it basically was a counselor who helped her in the community because she was still living at home. That worked for the first 3 years. I will say that if I had known there was such a thing as self-directed, probably wasn't called that at the time. I don't know what I would have chosen. Probably I would have thought it was too hard, too deep, too steep. But things didn't work out as well as we had hoped, mostly because Elaine was successful. And because she was successful, lots more people wanted to do what she was doing where she was, and it meant that things didn't work out so well for her because they didn't hire more people, and so the people who were working with her just had more to do. So I decided to investigate self-direction, and by 2009 we were in self-direction. We didn't have much of a budget because at that time, the difference between being in an agency and being in self-direction meant self-direction was not very well funded. And we had this little skimpy budget, enough for a part-time counselor, which was the residential staff part, and a part-time job coach, and me, the support broker who wasn't paid, because you had to have that. And of course, we had a financial management team, because under self-direction, you don't touch the money. You just send somebody the bills and they pay that. Of course, you have a budget and the bills are all in the budget. I mean, you're only paying for things that have been approved in your budget. Anyway, now things have changed, and Elaine gets essentially the same that she would get if she was in an agency. So there's a significant budget. She has many part-time employees and several vendors, and not necessarily paid, but she has a deeper bench or team that supports her. Not all of the people who support her live in this area, but that's one thing you need to think about as your young person gets older. You want to have, no one will ever place the mom and the dad, but you need to have people who know and understand your child, your young person, so that if something happens to you, they can step in and help that person make the kinds of decisions that you would make if you were able. You would help make. They would help support them. So you need a team of people who care about this person. Um, Elaine moved into her own place in 2014 because that's what she wanted to do. And that was before she had a voucher. We eventually got a HOC voucher, and I became her HOC landlord. Her voucher now covers a non-disabled roommate who is her living caregiver. That means that she has somebody overnight, because quite honestly, if something happened, like a fire, or what actually did happen, the empty apartment above hers, the hot water heater exploded. That's a serious problem. And because she had a non-disabled roommate, they called me, I called the fire department, they came in, and they uh, broke down the door of the unoccupied apartment, turned off the hot water heater, the gas hot water heater, and everything was safe. And I asked what my daughter was doing, and she said, somebody ought to do something about that. But she wouldn't have known what to do on her own. In 2014, when my daughter moved out, I became a founding member of an organization called Integrated Living Opportunities. And that was to help people like my daughter who were moving out of the family home into the community. And what ILO, or Integrated Living Opportunities, does is it looks at the individual as more than just somebody who needs a job or needs a place to live. It talks about their dreams, their challenges, their hopes, how they get around, what their talents are, what they do for fun, what they think about lifelong learning. In other words, their whole self. And it also um, we have community builders, because people like my daughter sort of relied on me to build their network. And Elaine needs help in building relationships and maintaining them, so that when people move or transfer, that she can fill in those gaps in in the network of support she has. Now, my daughter has a very full life. She has Potomac Community Resources. She has Special Olympics. She plays in an integrated band at Strathmore and has done for 23 years. Her church is very important to her. And in Damascus, one of the young people that she went to high school with, his mother started a program called Friends Unlimited. That's at Green Ridge Baptist Church, and they meet the third Saturday of every month. She's in Biz Arts, and in the past, she took challenge classes at Montgomery College. She's got a more active social life than I do. So one of the things that she has besides DDA is the HOC voucher. She gets Social Security, and it's a little bit more than, well, I'm older, so she gets some of it because of me. That's automatic. And up until June 30th, she had 2 jobs. Now she only has one, because the funding for the program that she was in dried up. So now she works at Red Wiggler Farm, which is seasonal, and the last day will be this Thursday, and then I'll open again in May. So what we will do is have her active and volunteering and doing other things during the day. So that's my story, and I hope this was somewhat helpful. In terms of DDA has changed the name and nature of some of the jobs. So we try and do workarounds in terms of complying with the regulations, but also trying to make sure that things are covered for my daughter.
Thank you so much,
Here we
Debbie.
go. You're welcome.
All right. So next we're going to have Mark. Are you guys doing it together?
Yeah, we'll do it together.
I'm going to add, wait 1 second. I'm going to add you. All right.
Oh, here we are. Hi.
Rita's going to go next, isn't she?
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, you guys are going to do it together.
Because you're gonna talk a little bit about financial.
Yeah, I don't have that much to say, so let Rita go first. She does
Okay.
98% of the work and 99% of the knowledge.
Well, you have the financial knowledge.
I have the financial.
Anyway, believe it or not, Robert was born in May 21st, 1985, and he's 40 years old this year, which I don't know how that happened since I'm only 39, but you know, that's a problem. But anyway, so you know, throughout school, he was diagnosed with some mental health challenges, and he was considered to be on the autism spectrum. They called it a lot of things when he was growing up, but by the time he was nearing the end of his high school years, it was definitely called autism spectrum. And he ended up going at a program called John L. Gildner School, RICA, and for the last 5 years. And you know, it was difficult because he didn't quite make it with the mental health issues, but he also didn't quite. There wasn't anything for kids that were on the autism spectrum, really, at the time. There was they had those I forgot what they call those centers in elementary school, but it got a lot harder from high school. So anyway, one of the things that really helped, because John L. Gildner was for mental health, is that he got into a program, a transition youth program that had apartments in Gaithersburg. So he got at a very young age, probably I guess it was 18 or 19, got the chance to live in an apartment while he was finishing high school. And and Robert was ready to move out. His brother was by that time 2 years older than him, was already going to college at University of Maryland, and Robert really did want to get out. I was a little more nervous about it, but he had a lot of issues. You know. But so he lived in a program called Guided Independence, which is now Shepherd Pratt, and I think they still have a program somewhere in Gaithersburg for people that had mental health issues. And as it turned out, most of them had mental health issues and autism spectrum issues. It was very interesting that those seemed to be related. We did, when Robert first qualified for DDA, when he was 21, which was around, I guess, 2006, he had a small budget. They started with about 15 to 20 hours. So we got a provider. He was already out of the house, so we got some DDA funds, and we had somebody to do this one provider. I won't say who. And they had trouble. The problem they had was getting staff services, getting people to come to Gaithersburg. And they weren't paying, I think at the time, they were paying $10 an hour. And it was very hard to get people. And they had a very hard time keeping people. So Robert, unfortunately, had a mental health crisis, and the provider dropped him overnight. So we ended up one of the good things is we got crisis intervention, which put us in a higher category. So because he was dropped by provider, and they decided, oh, he needed a lot more hours. So this started, so he got a lot more hours. Unfortunately, we could not find a provider that could consistently provide staff for him in his apartment. He could live in his apartment on his own, especially since he also had mental health support that was 24/7 um, in another apartment. But you know, he really needed the DDA support also. So anyway, but he had a mental health crisis and threw the person out of the house. At least they say he did. Although the person who worked with him, so they liked working with Robert. Robert's very personal. He loves computer games. He loves to play with people. He actually was pretty personal. But anyway, he got kicked out. And so we tried another provider, and that also didn't work. We knew about self-direction. Self-direction was just starting, I think, around 2004, 2005 in big. So I had gone to some seminars and some meetings about it and some webinars, and I knew about it, but it sounded like a lot of work. So that's why I went traditional services or provider services at first, because I thought that they can maintain it. But it wasn't working. So we wrote a plan, got a support group at the time, and we started on self-direction. And what was good about that is that we could select staff Robert liked. And that was very important to Robert. They had to respect him and they had to work with him. They could not just make a edict and say, you have to do it this way. They had to kind of work with Robert and, you know, make him agree. He could do a lot of stuff, but he needed somebody to monitor him and to help him along. So we elected, one of the places we went to find staff was through Indeed. I don't know if it's still a good way, because I haven't looked for staff, let's say, in 8 years. We've had the same staff for a long time, which has been great. So so we now have two direct support people that Robert gets part-time. He works for Goodwill for 4 days for 24 hours a week, and that turns over 4 days. And so he has staff in the evening when he gets off of work, 1:30, and then on Tuesdays and that's Mondays, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday he works part-time. So he can get himself to work. Fortunately, he's in a good place. He's in Rockville Town Center now. Before he was in Gaithersburg, but the bus lines on that side of county and the metro, from the bus to the metro, he can get around. Amazing, and he's very good at it. I would say in directions, he's probably better than most people. He's probably outstanding in finding directions and asking. He doesn't mind asking people, you know, where to go. I've never seen him get lost. So anyway, so he has so he pretty much can go to work on his own, and one of the things one of the problems we found with apartments is that people aren't very friendly. If anyone's lived in an apartment, you know, you can be by a neighbor for years and not know anybody. So that was one problem we had with apartments. But as Debbie, we also got involved with integrated living opportunities, probably around 2014, 15. And we joined them, and that provided him with social life. Because they got together at first when he lived in Gaithersburg, they would get together in the building, which was called the Crossings at the time, and they would get together once a week and talk over their issues, socialize. And because of that, then he made friends with several guys, and they would, you know, just themselves decide to get together. And he would have guys over to play games. They might take metro at night. They might take metro somewhere, or you know, go downtown, or with the help of staff. And you know, to me that has been the biggest advantage of something like integrated living opportunities. Um, so you know, he's had some rocky time because of his mental health issues. He's had some rocky time. But it seems like now that he's gotten in his late 30s, he's calmed down a lot. I think the early 20s, the mid 20s was tougher. And now that he's older, he's more mature. Although he still gets depressed sometimes, and we watch him. He has therapy once a week. He has, and also another thing he did on his own, he went from 300 pounds to less than 200 pounds in about 2 years during the pandemic. I'm not sure all the ways he did it. I think some of the things was not exactly healthy, but now he doesn't want to keep any food in it. So we're seeing an eating therapist and a regular therapist plus a psychiatrist, so we try to keep track of that. But now I think he's doing pretty good. He has a bank account for himself, which he has like a debit account, and his work money goes into that. So I let him use that, and he can make mistakes. Once in a while he spends on things he shouldn't, and we talk about it. But I think that's the way he learns. And then he gets SSDI because when I retired, they changed him automatically from SSI to SSDI. So then we have a bigger account with SSDI that we pay his rent from and pay his expenses, his Comcast, other little, things he needs to keep his apartment. Um, and that's one of the challenges now is that Mark and I are getting older. We're in our 70s, and we're concerned like what happens when we can't watch the people, because there's a lot of unknowns in this business. We all know DDA changes, federal government changes, federal government closed. In fact, we're having an issue right now. And I think it's because the federal government closed. He has a housing voucher, and all of a sudden this month they stopped paying. It could be Rockville. He gets his vouchers to Rockville Housing, but we're not sure of where the problem is. We're not sure whether the HUD money stopped, which is probably federal, or whether Rockville Housing is just having a problem right now. So, that's one of the issues that we are worried about is long-term planning. And, when Robert was getting out of high school, I started a group called MC Transitions, e-group, and a lot of people, posted on there the different issues they've had. And one of my things now is long-term planning. Who's gonna manage all this stuff once I'm gone? I try to teach Robert as much as he can learn, but there's still a lot of financial stuff he can't learn that he will need help and guidance. So we're hoping that some of our vendors, integrated living opportunities, and also we have a plan, First Maryland Trust, who will be able to, we hope, be able to handle the financial and help Robert manage the money. Because that is one area I think, we cannot give him $2,000 or $3,000 to manage so he can pay his rent. We're going to have to somebody help him. But he can have a debit card, have a reasonable amount of money so he can buy his food, can socialize. He has a girlfriend now, he can maybe take his girlfriend out once in a while and live without being kicked out of his apartment because he's not paying or something like that. But I mean, he will tell me when things are wrong, but I won't always be here.
So,
Mark,
okay, Mark, yeah, if
wanna
you
say
wanted to
anything,
go in
Mark?
about the few things.
Yeah, Rita, if you have more to say, I'll give you my time.
No, go ahead.
Okay,
Go
very
ahead.
quickly, two tips. I think that people should always file your federal and state taxes, even if you owe nothing, because you never know when an agency or a program requires that. So file
You're
the,
talking about for your child, right? You're talking about for
yes, you're talking
okay.
about for your child. The second thing is, if eligible, look into Maryland or another state's ABLE program, which is a very accessible, low-cost, friendly, absolutely terrific special needs trust. If you have SSI, you can put up to $100,000 in it. If it's SSDI, you can put up to $500,000 in it. Only $19,000 a year or so, but it's very good as compared to other special needs trusts. Its earnings are free, and so are most of the withdrawals. You can put money in it and then use that for rent or even vacations or needs that your child has. So it's a and it gets around the $2,000 limit on how much assets you own. It's a very good program. They give terrific help and support. If you want to find it, just Google Maryland Able or National Able,
We'll
and
put it
you'll
in
get.
the chat. We'll put it in the chat.
Okay, fine. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah,
And
perfect. And then just to say, that also will be for the rest of the year. Able will be one of our presentations. So
okay, well, then
we
I won't
will
go
have
on
them.
further.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
One other thing I wanted to say, I would also recommend a letter of intent. I have a letter, and in front of it, we have, different contacts and then different, and it's a letter that I keep updating a couple times a year. So that when we're gone, the people that take over or the agency that takes over will know, you know, what Robert needs and who it's contacts. So.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks so much. Okay, thank you, Mark and Rita. All right, so next, how about we have, let's do Ellen.
Hi there. I was just looking through some of the questions in the chat and trying to answer them. So I'll actually try to highlight a couple of things as I make my presentation so
Oh,
that
that's
it's
perfect.
hopefully it will be helpful. I would also say that there was a question about starting the process for guardianship, and I'm sure that you all will be having a session on guardianship or what's the other term? What's the other thing that most of us are doing instead of guardianship?
Supported decision
Thank you.
making.
It's supported decision making. So the person who asked about the process for guardianship, I would also Google supported decision making, since that's actually the process that's being recommended in the state of Maryland right now. All right, so my story, or I should say my son's story. My name is Ellen Jennings, and I'm the mother of Nicholas, who's a 31-year-old man on the autism spectrum. Our adult services journey began 10 years ago when Nick transitioned to DDA services at the age of 21. And at that time, we chose a traditional agency to provide personal supports and community development services. And I should note, for those of you who are very new to this process, when your adult child turns 21, he or she will transition. And at that time, assuming that your adult child qualifies for DDA services, you will be helped in creating a person-centered plan for your adult child. And that person-centered plan will come with a budget that will either be utilized for accessing services through a traditional agency or through self-directed services. And those of us who are speaking this evening have chosen at various points in times to switch to self-directed services. So I should say that, again, we chose a traditional agency at the time. At that time, Nick was still living at home, and he was also participating in the Sunflower Bakery training program, which was paid for by Doors. And because he was spending so many hours in the Sunflower Bakery training program at the time, he didn't need as many hours from his DDA agency as he'd require later. So in 2017, after graduating from both the Sunflower Bakery and Sunflower Cafe training programs, both of which were great, Nick got a job at the Harris Teeter Deli as a sandwich maker. Now, due to his training with Sunflower Bakery, he has great food service skills, but unfortunately, his disability makes it very challenging for him to stay on task and follow specific instructions, meaning he likes to do it his way. In any case, his DDA agency provided employment supports at the beginning of his job, but very soon tapered them to almost nothing, though Nick still needed almost full-time support. So I started going in for every shift, which started, thank you, at 7 a.m. And of course, this was not sustainable. So Nick was soon reassigned to stocking shelves and assisting at checkout. And I say that just because that sort of starts setting the stage for why we ended up switching to self-direct. When COVID arrived, we made the decision to pull Nick from his job at Harris Teeter, and he was home with us full-time for the next year, receiving community services via Zoom from his DDA agency and all personal supports from his family. And during this time, we were very fortunate to get a spot for Nick in an apartment at Main Street, though due to COVID, he wouldn't move in until the spring of 2021. Once Nick had moved into his apartment at Main Street, he was getting personal supports from the DDHA agency that we were utilizing at the time. And they were not able to provide consistent staff coverage or the number of hours required by his person-centered plan, which I understand is often the reason that many of us end up deciding to switch to self-direct, is that DDA agencies just can't provide the number of hours that our adult child both needs and has on their person-centered plan, meaning that in our case, that family members were still providing multiple hours of personal supports each week, since Nick was now at an apartment and no way could stay on his own at an apartment without significant supports. And so needless to say, this was confusing and destabilizing for Nick. At the same time, we had him start Project Search, which is a 9-month employment training program, because we hoped it would get him used to doing things in person again, even though he had already, done the job training program with Sunflower Bakery. I mean, he had been on Zoom like many of us for a year and a half. And while Project Search had its pros and cons, the good news is that his last internship at the King Street Oyster Bar, which is a restaurant, resulted in a part-time job for Nick. So more on that in a bit. As a side note, since Nick was a small child, we had been paying out of pocket for behavioral support services. Nick has always required behavior programs and incentive systems, in response to his autism spectrum disorder. And the DDA agency that we were using was unwilling to have its staff involved with any of these programs, even though individual staff of that agency said the programs would make a huge difference in their ability to support Nick successfully. So between the agency's inability to provide the number of personal support hours Nick required and their unwillingness to utilize his behavioral support programs, we were at an impasse, which is when I decided to pursue self-directed services. I began researching the SDS option, self-directed services option, in the spring of 2022, talking with everyone I knew whose disabled family member was utilizing self-direct. I was fortunate to get the names of an incredible CCS and support broker, and spoke with and interviewed them in advance. And I would strongly encourage anybody thinking about moving to self-directed services to begin looking for the people that they will be working with before they ever make the switch. I also spoke with Tia Henry of Southern Maryland and Maryland DDA, and she did provide me with very helpful information. Before we were even approved, I began looking for support staff, getting recommendations through parents and support staff of other self-directed individuals. During Nick's first half year, utilizing self-directed services as part of his budget, we were still employing the DDA agency that runs Project Search to provide supports for Nick at his restaurant job. Unfortunately, like the agency we were using when Nick was employed by Harris Teeter, they were unable to provide the amount and duration of support Nick needs in order to succeed at work. It's not rocket science, but apparently that's hard. So we decided to switch from using an agency to employing our own self-directed staff to provide job supports for Nick, and this has worked really well. It means that Nick now has personal support, community support, and job support staff hours each week from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. each day. When Nick first began utilizing self-directed services, he had 2 support staff covering all of those hours. And over the past 3 years, we've expanded to 4 regular support staff covering his hours, plus 1 backup staff person, because honestly, there is always somebody who's calling in sick or going on vacation or has something else going on. And that's understandable. These are human lives. We also have an excellent support broker, and for me, that's essential. And we had a robust day-to-day admin position filled by me until October 1st of this year, when the DDA slashed this incredibly important position. A little bit more on that later. One of the best changes is that we now have an amazing behavior support specialist, a BCBA, on staff as part of Nick's person-centered plan, which has made such a difference in our ability to train Nick's support staff, make sure they can support him with his behavior program, and give him the opportunities to succeed in his goal of living semi-independently. Overall, self-directed services has been a win for Nick. It's a lot of work for me. I'm going to put that straight out there. It is a lot of work for the parent, but it is a heck of a lot better than the frustration of constantly not getting the supports he needed from traditional agencies. Nick's behavioral challenges are not easy, and I am very involved in coordinating his staff, behavior specialists, support brokers, CCS, etc., which is why I'm so concerned about the DDA's recent almost complete elimination of the day-to-day admin position. I have no idea who will perform this role for Nick without pay, thank you very much, when I'm no longer able to do it. In closing, utilizing self-directed services allows Nick to live on his own, volunteer and work in the community, engage in the myriad activities he loves to do, and stay healthy and safe. If he were still with a traditional agency, there is no way he could live semi-independently in his apartment. He'd either be in a group home or living with family, hello, me. He definitely wouldn't be able to keep a job or do all the activities he loves. While I'm concerned about the future, I mean, like the other speakers, that is the biggest concern. And I'm in regular conversation with other SDS families about what it will look like. For now, self-directed services is working for Nick, and I'm really grateful it's an option.
Thank you so much, Ellen. That was really nice. Okay. Next we're gonna have, let's go with Holly.
Hi, my name is Holly Hoffman. I am a mother of 5. T 4 with disabilities. Currently, my youngest is with self-directed services. She graduated from Gaithersburg High School about 2.5 years ago, 3. So, back up a little bit. My daughter graduated about 3 years ago, from Gaithersburg High School. Um, well, even before that, we had just moved in October of her senior year because we found a home that we could afford. And so we moved out to Washington County from Montgomery County after 20 years of being there. She graduated from Marshall Street High School, and she's still in touch with a lot of her friends from Montgomery County. We had issues, and this is something to consider for the parents that have um, folks that are graduating this year out of the program, is to make sure that you're really tracking your milestones, such as turning in your paperwork, making sure that the person that you're assigned to is contacting you at the right time to turn in paperwork. I found out in April, 8 weeks before she graduated, that the social worker or whatever, I forget what she was called, but the contact person for the agency that we were assigned to disappeared. No contact, no nothing. So we had 8 weeks to put together a plan and get a PCP in place and get it approved. So if you have issues with your person, contact your agency and ask for somebody who is experienced and not somebody who is new. I had somebody new, they disappeared. I don't know where. So we got as we went through the process and she graduated, you need to keep in mind that there will be a gap between the time she graduates and the time services start, which is July 1st. It was a little bit scary because I didn't know what we were going to do or how it was going to work out, but we did choose self-directed. And what I'm hearing from many of the folks coming in now into self-directed from agencies is taking a long time to make that transition from an agency to self-directed. So again, if you are in a point where this coming June or May, your person is going to graduate, you might want to make the choice. Either you're definitely going self-directed or you're definitely going agency. Each has its benefits, each has its um, pluses and minuses. We chose self-directed because I knew that my daughter is very social. that she makes friends pretty quickly, that I could hire the staff that I wanted to. And having heard the horror stories from others, I knew that I wanted to keep her safe. Knowing the statistics of abuse and other places, I wanted to be able to hire people that I knew. And one of the bonuses for me was I was able to quit my job in Montgomery County and become full-time staff for my daughter. What I'll do when I retire, I don't have an answer to that yet, but having her as my daughter after many, many years of being in the public school system, to be able to be part of her staff and be part of her life has been a real joy for me. And she's so funny because she'll look at me and go, Mommy, you're my staff. And she just gives me this look of, I am so glad that you're part of my life and just being part of it. We have other staff as well. We have two other part-time, one other full-time and one part-time staff that I trust. She has a very full life through a group called Frederick Self-Directed Services Facebook group. Cool Kids. If anybody is in the area, Damascus and North, it's open to anybody. She has a social life that is mind blowing. The next component that we're working on slowly is a job. Um, right now, over the last 3 years, we've been establishing friendships and social life and trying to get routines in place as well as staff. So we have jobs here at home that she can do. Um, as someone, I think Ellen expressed, DDA severely cut the budget this year. And so now nothing, at least for us, nothing in the family goods and directed services is being approved other than staff. So if you come into the program this coming year, you may need to think about, how am I going to fund the activities that my adult wants to do. For us, it's been through donations. We're on 4 acres, so we have poultry. So every day she goes out on her own now, after 3 years of a lot of training. She goes out on her own. She takes care of her ducks. She collects the eggs. She feeds them, comes back and lets out the chickens and feeds them. She lets out the turkeys and feeds them as well. And then she has learned to, we have a place that also has a child with disabilities. So they've had compassion on my daughter and are allowing her to leave her eggs there. And people will donate to her self-directed services fund in exchange for her eggs. And that has been very productive for her in giving her jobs to do in the morning, jobs in the afternoon, and something consistent that she has to do. So we're very grateful for those opportunities in moving out to Washington County, because that's something we couldn't have done in Montgomery. So trying to think anything else. Um, I would say that friendships after you graduate, you're not going to have that structure like in school where your child is forced to be with somebody. You're going to have issues with somebody liking somebody or not liking somebody. So just be aware that you may need, as a direct support person, or your people may need to communicate that to you. And you may need to communicate and figure out who is being supported by who, and working things out. My daughter is boy crazy. And so we've had to work out issues with what is appropriate, what is a good friend, what is not a good friend, and supporting her in that way. So those are some of the issues we've dealt with over the last couple years. But I've been so grateful for being self-directed from the start and finding the Frederick Self-Directed Services group. The moms that started out very small. And I would, if you are out there and you are wondering, what am I going to do? Get together. If your son or daughter has classmates, reach out to another parent. Say, hey, they're graduating this year. What if we just started bowling once a week, or going to the library and coloring once a week and playing games? And what you will find is others will come, and you'll be able to start a group, a social group, and be able to support one another. I highly recommend it. Our group is only like 3 years old, and it has exploded into about 40 or 50 people attending events and about 2,000 followers. So it's amazing.
Holly, can you put that name of the group in the group chat?
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
because there was some
Questions.
one of the parents, yeah, were asking about it.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I'll tell you what some of the things real quick for you, and I'll let everybody move on. Some of the things she does is like on Monday, she'll do karaoke, she does bowling, she does yoga, they get together as a do dance. A DJ has donated his time. So they have a professional DJ that does a dance party for them every week. Groundswell and Frederick started out as eight students. One of my daughters, one of them. Now they have like 50, and they run classes on Wednesdays and Fridays, as well as other specialized classes. That's in Frederick. They're wonderful. What else does she do? She has a Bible study that she goes to on her with staff. They have swimming. They have a coloring club now, and I forget. We actually had to pull up and make her own online calendar for staff so that staff would know where to go and what to do and not get confused, because we despite having 3 staff, again, like people say, they call out, they get sick or whatever, something happens, somebody needs to trade days. So you need to have a tool that all the staff can go on to see what's going on for that day. So one of the benefits too with the self-directed is you do get paid your mileage for your staff, and you can offer a lot of benefits for your staff. So if you're thinking now, I think I want to do self-directed, then let's start looking for your staff, start thinking about what your pay is going to be, and are you going to be the one running the program, and do you have the time? It is time consuming. I'm constantly writing little emails, little sending off letters, texting my staff. It's just part of being a mom, and as well as being the head staff person. So, but yes, Frederick's self-directed services on Facebook. So a lot of the activities are free. So, but it started because 4 moms pulled their children from agencies and did not like the services being provided there. They were being verbally abused as well as physically abused. So I don't say that all to say all agencies are bad, that those 4 moms found them in that situation, and they were like, I'm done. I'm done. We're going to pull together and start a group. So that's why I encourage you, if you are a person who wants to do that, do it. Go get on and find a couple other parents that want to do something once or twice a week. We've gone from once a day activities to having multiple activities a day in since I joined 3 years ago. So that's it, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right,
You're
and
welcome.
then last but definitely not least, we have Sherry.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Sherry Dexter. I thought maybe before I go into a little bit about Timmy's story, I've been kind of watching the chat a little bit, and there's been some questions about different acronyms that have been thrown around and some of just the words and things like that. So I'll try to straighten them out, but there's a lot of great people who have just spoken who have been in the program much longer than Timmy has, and so please, if I get any of this wrong, please correct me and chime in as well for those who've already have spoken. But just so everybody gets a feeling again, I'm not sure exactly who's on the call in terms of your experience. Some of you may already be in traditional services or what they're now calling provider services. Some of you, this may be the very first look and to think about what to do. So forgive me if maybe I'm oversimplifying some of the things, but just to kind of, I guess, have some ground setting here. So the DDA basically, of course, is the government agency that administers not only the self-direction program, but also these provider programs. And the money that they get for these programs is basically Medicaid money. In the state of Maryland, there's basically, for these programs, there's a match. So half of it's funded by the state, the other half is funded by the federal government. So the state always has to be really careful about how much money they have allocated from the state legislature to use for these programs. And then they also have to be sure that their programs are in compliance with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, or also known as CMS. And that's important too, because of the batch that they get, they have to fall within certain parameters to be able to keep that match. So some of the things that you've heard tonight from some of the people who have spoken, you've heard that there's been a lot of changes going on at the DDA. I represent a group that I started about a year ago because of all of these changes at the DDA, called Concerned Citizens of Self-Direction Maryland. And the reason we started was because there was just a lot going on all at once, and we really needed to make sure that we actively had our voice at the table at the legislature when all of this was happening. Just so you know, too, there's also some other fantastic groups that are out there. SDAN, which also has been around for years and does a tremendous job with educating people, and also provides some advocacy work as well. But from my understanding from talking to people at the DDA, I'm also on their sustainability committee right now. They're making all of these changes in part because they are somewhat or were out of compliance with some of the things that CMS requested. So they're trying to make some changes to fix those, but they were also over budget. And there were a number of factors over the years that led to them being over budget. So kind of the two created the perfect storm, and there were a lot of changes that happened as a result. So people who have been in the program for a very long time have felt the impact, particularly because the program, for years had functioned a certain way. And then there were just a number of changes that the DDA had rolled out suddenly within a matter of months that impacted the staff that you could hire and the way that the funding and some of the activities and things like that. So I think all of us who have been involved with self-direction one way or another, we're all still getting our footing to figure out what is next, how this is going to affect our participants or our participants or our family members who are directly involved in these services, and really trying to understand what's next, and to make sure that we've got the appropriate budget for them, that we've got the appropriate plan that really fits their needs. So while you're hearing all these things about things being a lot of changes going on, that is true. That is very true. I have to echo the sentiments of the family members who have already spoken. I don't think I would change the course of where Timmy is as far as thinking about going to a provider service versus being in self-direction. And let me tell you a little bit about why. Timmy's only been in self-direction for a few years. He was at the Longview School in Montgomery County. For those of you who may not be familiar with Longview, it is attached to an elementary school in Germantown. And it is really for those who are severely affected. In Timmy's case, he's got cerebral palsy. He needs 100% assistance. He is nonverbal. So like even to change the channel on the TV, he needs somebody else to pick up the remote to do that for him. So Timmy cannot feed himself. He cannot change himself. He cannot bathe himself. I mean, you name it. Timmy needs assistance in every possible way. When Timmy was getting out of Longview, when he was, turning 21, finishing his final year, we had to think about what was next for Timmy. Fortunately, the transition teacher that we had was very helpful, sending a lot of information to us about, well, here are options. Also did their best to try to give us opportunities to meet with different programs that were out there. The sad part for us is that Timmy was also coming out of school just as the country was recovering from COVID. So there was a lot of, are we requiring masks? Are we requiring vaccines? What's the distancing? Are people going to be at home doing on Zoom? Are they going to be in person? Is it going to be, different hours? So you name in the gamut. It was a lot of uncertainty about what programs had the ability to do. And for us, we had the choice of probably about 4 traditional agencies to take a look at, ones that were still very much on Zoom. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense to us to go through an agency when we were still going to have to be at home with Timmy, sitting on a Zoom. It just didn't make any sense. So for us, my husband worked for Montgomery County Schools, and he was just able to take early retirement to become Timmy's first employee. And so it was a process of, figuring out how do we get into the self-direction program. And that's where, especially as we were transitioning from COVID, again, all these acronyms, all these different people kind of thrown at us. Okay, so you've got the DDA at the top, and then you have this CCS. Okay, somebody asked what was CCS. CCS is the Coordinator of Community Services. This is an agency essentially that the DDA has hired for you to help you essentially get in all of your paperwork and help you with the person-centered planning that you do. So we worked with them. You also, with self-direction, you hire a support broker. So what is a support broker? Support broker, I kind of think about, and I have a sister who's a real estate agent, so this is where my mind is. The support broker sort of functions the same way that you would hire a real estate agent to help you buy or sell a house. The support broker is your go-to to really help you navigate the whole process. So the paperwork that ultimately has to be filed by the CCS, your support broker can help you go through the whole process to make sure you're understanding the forms, help you go through the budget to make sure that your participant really is getting the services that they need. If you run into problems along the way, they're really there to coach you, help you, really guide you through. And then there's other people I heard mention, like you may have a behavioral specialist, depending if your child has behavioral issues, that might be somebody to make sure again that they get the right services. For Timmy's on medication, so we have to have a nurse that is part of the process. We're part of what they call a delegating nurse. So it's not that Timmy has a nurse hand in hand on staff, but we have somebody who essentially, because my husband is Timmy's staff and is being paid through this program, he has to be overseen by somebody in the state that is licensed and approved by the DDA to make sure that he's giving the medicine appropriately, and if there's any problems that we could go to her as a go-to. Try to think of who else. We also have the financial management agency, which also helps process all of these different payments and make sure that people get paid. So there's a lot of different pieces of people who are part of the team, and that doesn't even include, all the staff that you have to basically have somebody, whether that's a family member or somebody from the outside. What's beautiful about self-direction is that it's really focused on the person, of course. So it's person-centered planning. I remember hearing that term. Somebody spoke about that. The other thing is that it really gives a lot of flexibility with what they call budget and employer authority. So I think Ellen had mentioned you get a top line budget, and that's where you really start thinking about, okay, what services does that person need? And that's part of the plan that you develop and ultimately rolls into a budget. So there's the opportunities to hire the right staff to make sure that that's, the appropriate person or people. And then of course you've heard the term IFDGS, which has to do with basically a fund that's available to pay for different things, including different types of activities. For Timmy, certain things are not paid for. Timmy also, I heard that somebody said that their child was in, or child, really adult child, was in the Challenge program. That's a fabulous program if you are in Montgomery County, or also I know that Frederick offers it through the community college. That is a fabulous thing where the person can enroll in classes, and they're non-credit classes. So you go in, like Timmy's taking one right now on baking. He's done paint party. And it's also a great opportunity, as Holly was just saying, to be able to connect with other parents, with other support people, and really support, have your own community. What we love about self-direction is really just being able to design the day that works for Timmy. Timmy's not a morning person, so for him to have activities later in the day is fabulous. If we want to do stuff with Timmy on the weekend, we figure out what that is. It's just really kind of thinking about what is the gamut of things. So it reminds me a lot of when my kids were young, okay, we're gonna go bowling today, we're gonna go to a museum, are we going to go get ice cream? I mean, we're really trying to get these people out into the community. That's the whole goal, is really to give them a lot of flexibility, but also to create those opportunities for socialization and for them to really direct what they want to do in their lives to make the most of it. So sometimes it's employment, sometimes it's just social activities, sometimes it's classes. I mean, again, I just wouldn't, at this point in time for us, for Timmy, I really think that the self-direction program is really the program that he needs. At some other point, it may be the traditional model, provider model, may be the way to go as my husband and I age, but at this point in time, this program just is a really fabulous opportunity, and we would love, to have more people involved, but we also know that there's a lot, again, going on with the DDA. So I think probably anybody who's talked tonight can certainly tell you about their experiences and to also try to help you navigate those.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I want to say that I know that there is so much happening in this chat, so please, please, please remember to save it and download it. You can do that there is a button, 3 buttons on the bottom right-hand side, and it says Save Chat. Because even though I am going to open it up for all questions, there has been so much information shared through the chat. Okay, so now I'm gonna highlight everybody, and this will give everybody an opportunity if anybody has any specific questions. I know some of them are general, or like they might be different, but one of the things, I did see a question that I thought would be helpful, like, talking about some of the changes. I know you guys have talked about some of them, but they were asking, there was just like a general question about any changes that has recently been made or that are continuing to be made. Or is it just an unknown?
I think one of the things that was mentioned earlier was the change in job description. For those of us who are older, the day-to-day administrative position was a wonderful position because we could train somebody to take on the role that we, the parents, had. I know Ellen mentioned it. Well, I'm in my 80s. My daughter is 41. I never said what her disability was. My daughter has Down syndrome, and she has great social skills, but not so great academic skills. In fact, many people didn't think she'd amount to much, including some members of my own family. When she moved out, there are people who didn't think she would be successful, but she is. But I had hoped, for example, let me just say, that's one of the things that DDA is doing. They are changing the descriptions of some roles. And that is hard to accept because you hire somebody with the idea you're going to grow them into the position. And the next year, that position has changed so significantly, it is no longer going to be a legacy. It's going to be something quite different, right? I'm sure Ellen would agree with me on that one, but that makes it hard. They've also changed what used to be the category where you could put clubs or other activities. When Elaine started, she's now 41, but when she started, she didn't have very much money. And my position was any money she had went to help staff so that staff felt valued. So I didn't, if I had to pay for her activity, we would pay for the activity. I'd rather use the money for staff wages and so forth. But it would be nice, and I at one point helped other people as being their support broker, and there are people who depend on somebody else helping them fund those activities. So that was hard, and it probably will be hard for many people to be able to socialize unless they can do so with the kind of free activities. I know that someone mentioned all the things that they're doing now that they moved to Washington County, but don't sell Montgomery County short. Montgomery County has lots of wonderful activities. Um, Up in Upper Montgomery County, one of my daughter's classmates from 2005, the mother started Friends Unlimited, which meets the third Saturday of every month except December in her church. And it's grown from there. How many people like my daughter still meet with the kids the young people she graduated from high school with? And of course it's grown because they have
If
boyfriends and girlfriends and so forth. And it keeps growing, but it's wonderful. There are a lot of free
if
things out there if you just look and ask.
I was gonna say, I think I would say for the people who've been in self-direction, they've definitely noticed these changes from the DDA. They've been impacted one way or another because, as mentioned, whether you have a day-to-day administrator or some of the limitations on these activities or the amount of money that you can access to pay your staff or the descriptions of staff roles, all of that has changed. For somebody who's entering, it may be a completely different experience. It's hard to know. I mean, even my role being on the sustainability committee, I think we're going through this process of trying to figure out, like, how do we make this stop? Like, how do we make all these changes stop and get to a place where we're just kind of, keep the program going so that it's very predictable. So I think there's, a process of looking at short-term and long-term solutions, and really also a process of modernizing it to be determined exactly what that looks like. But I think, so there may be some bumps in the road if you're just entering self-direction, that you may not notice the things that all of us are talking about, because we went from having one budget or a service, and now that service may not be available, or as much money may not be available. So we were at a place where something was, and now it's changed. But if you're just entering, you're going to be coming in where things have already changed. Will they keep changing? Probably somewhat. I couldn't tell you, like, is it going to be the massive change that all of us have felt, or if it's going to be more, I would say, smaller swings until they kind of level out.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And then if there is anyone who has a specific question, if you want to raise your hand, I can always have you speak and ask a question to the panelists. Okay, I do see one question. Does Montgomery County have an e-group focused on self-direction where people who are not yet in self-direction can participate and learn more about it in case they chose to do so? Now, Sherry, your group, can you share
I can post the
maybe in the chat?
Facebook pages for both SDAN, Self-Directed Advocacy Network, and the group that Sherry described, Concerned Citizens for Self-Direct in Maryland.
Be fabulous. Thank you.
Think so.
And again, I did say that I'm going to save the chat, clean it up, and then I will send it out with the recording. once the recording is done. So don't worry about saving the chat, but I'll make sure to do that. Okay.
And certainly, you know, if anybody's just looking for activities, you know, you could start with this group. You know, I could tell you about a few that are in Montgomery County, of course, PCR, and I'm sorry that I didn't mention that when I was doing my presentation, but Timmy attends, there's like 2 music classes that Timmy attends, and they have a bunch of classes, Up County Resources, Spirit Club. There's also something that's fairly new. It used to be called, why am I blanking? What it's now called Ryan's Place, a foundation. But and that's near the air park, but they are basically have set up like a community hub, like a community center for activities. Main Street, also in Rockville, you can join a membership there. So there's definitely things, even the county has like stuff through Montgomery County Parks and Recreation. I mean, I think probably aside from just kind of doing the overall paperwork and getting into the groove of self-direction of understanding all that, one of the things that just takes time is just trying to figure out like everything that's out there and then how you structure what a day is. But the good news is that there's nobody saying, you know, how come you didn't show up to bowling today? Or how come you didn't go to the class at, you know, the challenge class today? If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out because the person doesn't feel like it or feel sick or doesn't have the support. I mean, that's the beauty of self-direction, is being able to structure a day, a week, a month, so it really fits the person's needs.
One of the other things I would say is the best thing about self-direction, as far as I'm concerned, is the staff stability. My daughter has had 2 people who have been with her since 2009.
I
Yeah,
agree
and
with
that's
you.
also wonderful because you can pick the
Yeah.
staff.
Right.
Yes, and she's the one who picks them. I mean, I screen, but she's the one who actually hires the people. It makes a big difference.
Yes.
It's the
And I
same
had
thing
to
with my son. Having people that they like, that they can work with is very important. Um, Robert does not like to be dictated to. He has a right to his life. And he has 2 staff members. He's really like, I don't even know how to hire staff anymore. I'd have to go look. I'd have to go read up again, because I've had the same staff for 6 or 7 years in.
So how does somebody who recently, right, so I know some of you recently more have started the program, what do you use now for hiring staff?
I can answer that, at least from my experience. I asked friends. I originally wanted somebody more Julia's age, 23. But I also knew I needed staff that had experience in different areas. And so I asked friends. And then I asked my one friend, she said yes. And then once we were in and out in the community, I knew I needed more staff, and I began to ask around to the other direct support personnel that I knew, and they sent me recommendations. So that is how I found my other person. So, and now, at least for us, where we are with the group, and this is what will happen with the group and any group that you join, you will find that you watch out for each other. You know who's the good DSP and who's the okay one, and who's looking for work and who's not looking for work. So.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
I've had a lot of
Any
success. I've had success with Indeed. I think Indeed is a fairly good, because they have resumes, and you can sort of look at this first before you. So I really like the Indeed form.
And a lot of times too, through these Facebook groups that Ellen mentioned, uh, people will just put out, you know, like, I've got a great DSP, direct support person, you know, so basically you can, you know, you could ask around, post that question if somebody, you know, knows of anybody. You could also, there's some money in the budget that you could put for advertising if you wanted to go out and try to find somebody, you know, like I know a lot of people use care.com. or other types of websites to try to find people.
I think you get up to $500 for advertising.
Right. Yep.
So I never had to use it because I could always find some free secrets. I think people can do that.
All right. Does
Yeah.
anybody
So, I mean,
have?
I was just
You
gonna
go,
say real quick,
Sherry.
if anybody ends up going on these websites that Ellen had suggested, like SDAN or even Concerned Citizens, you will see people, they will be airing their concerns about the program. Again, it's just because it's a lot of transition right now that's happening. It's a lot of transition that's happening quickly, and people, again, are just trying to make sense of it. They're trying to find their footing and making sure, again, that the person that they've supported gets all the services that they need and that they deserve. So I say that because I don't want anybody to be scared off when they go off and they read some of these messages that are on there. It's frustration because all of it has been rolled out so quickly. It's sort of like a brick being thrown at you and like, oh, okay, you catch it or duck, or are you going what are you going to do with that? So it's just an interesting time to be there. But as you've heard from everybody tonight, I mean, there's so many pluses to the program, and I know that we'll all figure this out and we'll all weather it.
Yeah.
And the
I
truth,
wouldn't
sorry.
change. I wouldn't change programs. I just the benefits for our family have been so much better than an agency direction. And I do have friends who have done agency. Even now, their children are in agencies, and for our family in particular, it was the benefits outweigh the minuses. So
Yeah, and I mean, the honest truth is everybody who's on this Zoom knows it's not easy parenting a child or an adult child with special needs. It's just not. And it doesn't get easy. Sorry to tell you that. But, honestly, in some ways it gets harder after they leave high school because at least in high school, it's a given, and honestly, it's an entitlement, right? You are entitled legally to a free and appropriate education for your child. And it's not an entitlement when they're an adult. You have to prove over and over again that they are qualified for any benefits that they receive. And so, as Holly was saying, it's so essential to be in contact with other parents who are going through the same thing and to get support. And, I know this isn't a take care of yourself Zoom, but to figure out some way to take care of yourself because, it is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and there is so much that is unknown. We don't know what's going to happen with the federal government and Medicaid. There's so much that we just don't know. And we're going to have to roll with it time and time again. And so, I just think that the more we can put ourselves in that mode and, constantly advocate for our kids, of course, but also just know that it's not going to get easier. Sorry.
yeah. I will also say by being with other parents and starting it before yours leave the 21 age, 18 to 21, when you're working on that, the cliff that they talk about is not going to be as bad if you are already established in what you're going to do and the direction you're going. I know of a couple moms who said, "Oh, I don't think I'm going to do this, and I'm going to wait and I'm going to hold off." And guess what? They're out. They can't now they're several years out before they can get services because they didn't do it. So, and the cliff is not as bad as you think it's going to be if you are aware of what you're walking into. So,
Yeah, that's Holly, I agree with you. One of the advice I would get if you're in school, look at everything that your child possibly qualifies for. And even if it isn't perfect, pick something make sure you don't get out of high school and not, because I know many people in my MC transitions group said, oh, I thought maybe they'd be able to go to college. They'd be able to do this, they'd do that. And then they fail. And then it's much, much harder once you're out of school to get services. So if you're in school and they qualify for something and you see the light, I would at least get yourself on the roll.
The other thing I would say is don't let them sell your person short. I was told, well, let's just put it this way. My daughter did not make it, was not selected by the sought after agency. I said we went with a traditional agency. What I didn't tell you is that I was recommended to try a sheltered workshop. But they were really, the reason that I went with it, because they were actually looking that year to find somebody courageous enough to try and work with a job coach and go outside of the sheltered workshop and find a job. And I said it was successful for the first couple of years. But it was so successful that without hiring anybody else, everybody wanted to go with the same program that Elaine was in, my daughter was in. And of course, then it didn't work because there were too many people. Anyway, that's why we ended up going to self-direction, because that and the other program, both of them sort of collapsed at the same time. But it only collapsed because it was so successful that too many people wanted to do the same thing. But the point being that no one expected my daughter to be so successful. They really wanted to write her off, both the school system and the different agencies, but she prevailed and she still does.
I would say too, the team that you establish is critical, and that's not just the people that you hire as far as supporting, like, who's gonna be the direct support person, whether that's family or whether that's somebody else, a friend or somebody else that you don't know. But all of these other levels that I mentioned, your CCS, for instance, the CCS, the Coordinator of Community Supports or Services rather, a lot of those people are very overworked right now, very stressed, and may not have a whole lot of time, or they may be a person that's very green. They're known. Some of these agencies have high turnover. If you are not satisfied with your CCS, you can tell the DDA to please find a new agency, or there may be a different CCS within that agency that could help you. Somebody had asked the question about a support broker. The DDA maintains a list of people who are certified support brokers. Same on that front. Take your time, interview them, ask other people for recommendations. That person is going to be a lifesaver to you, especially somebody who really understands the system. Doesn't mean that they have to have 20 years of experience, but somebody who really has taken the time to understand the whole process, and ones who've had experience are going to be really helpful, because with all these changes, they'll be able to help you navigate some of them, as far as they may have good contacts at the DDA, as far as at the regional offices. They may be having good contacts with other support brokers that they may ask questions like, how do you do this? So I would say make sure that you have a really good team. And if you don't like the support broker that's been hired for the team, that you've hired for the team, you can switch on that too. So know that the team is always flexible, and that's also part of the process, is that there's a flexibility about who surrounds the participant.
And the other important thing is the people on the team really need to know your participant. And I think it's important to keep building that team outward. In my case, I have cousins of my daughter and people who aren't necessarily in the nearby community, but they are in on the Zoom meetings and they know how sort of the sausage is made, so that there are more people who have their ear to the ground and know what's going on, because I think it's important. And as far as support broker, I would say one of the critical things for a support broker, besides knowing what the job entails, is they need to know the participant. Because it's more than a job. It's knowing what works for the adult, the person who is receiving the services. Because if it doesn't work for them, it's not going to work for anybody.
I wanted to clarify something just because of some of the questions in the chat. For those of you who are transitioning in a transitioning period, meaning you're a almost adult child or adult child is finishing high school and transitioning to adult services. Just sort of to reiterate what some other people have said, but also just to like put in a nutshell the process. You are going to be transitioning from an entitlement program, which is a free and appropriate education with your school system, to a Medicaid waiver service program that is run by the Developmental Disabilities Administration of the state of Maryland. Just because your child is receiving special education services through your school system does not mean you automatically qualify to receive Medicaid waiver services through Maryland's Developmental Disabilities Administration. You need to work with your school team to make sure, and this is where I will just not disagree with those who said don't let them sell your child short, but I will offer the other side. Do not let them tell you your child will not need these services.
Yeah.
Do not let them tell you your child will not need these services, because if you do not try to get these services, again, these Medicaid waiver services administered through Maryland's Department of Developmental Disabilities Administration, if you do not get those services when your child transitions and becomes age 21, it is going to be amazingly more difficult later. So do everything you can to get the services that your child qualifies for when your child is transitioning out of high school. And in answer to another one of the questions, your coordinator of community services is a person who is paid for by the DDA, okay? Even if you self-direct, they are not on your staff team. They are the coordinator. They're not paid out of your budget. They're paid for by the Developmental Disabilities Administration. But every single person who receives Medicaid waiver services in the state of Maryland has a coordinator of community services. So in answer to the question, do you need a support broker or a CCS first? You need a CCS before you can do anything. All right. So as part of your getting approved for a waiver, you will be assigned to CCS. Now, you do have some say in who that CCS is and what do we call them? Agencies, Sherry? What do we call, I guess, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, what group they work for. But that is the first sort of staff person you need, is a coordinator of community services, because they will then walk you through the whole process.
Has been honestly so helpful. Just a reminder, we will be having programs. So first, thank you so much to this amazing panel. Secondly, I will be saving the chat as well as having a recording, and I will send that out to everyone by the beginning of next week. So please look out for that. And then also looking ahead, our virtual transition times meeting will be held once a month from now until June. All meetings will continue to be offered with simultaneous ASL and Spanish and archived on the PCR website. The next meeting will be focused on college night and will be held on Thursday, December 4th at 6:30. We will have a variety of college opportunities, including Montgomery College Disability Support Services, Graduate Transition and Challenge Program, and accessing financial aid in Montgomery College. So just a reminder, please, if this is your first Transition Times meeting, there is a paper on our website. You can get it as well from the MCPS, and it has a flyer of all the dates, and all of them already show what is planned, and a lot of the things that were talked about, ABLE, guardianship, all of that will be discussed in further webinars. And then anybody who joined it recently, if you go to the PCR website, all of the webinars that we've already had over the past 2 years are on there as well, in English and Spanish version. So please feel free to go back and look if you are new to the transition times, because there are many webinars that have already been done that will be very helpful.